I love this so much. I love this. My name's Karen Matula. I'm the coordinator of Gladney University, and I'm just so happy to welcome you here with us today. You've got a wonderful workshop ahead of you. Just a few little housekeeping things. If you don't mind putting your phones on silent for me, I would really appreciate that. I hope you've helped yourself to a snack, some tea, some coffee. If you need to use the restroom, they're right out these doors and to your left. You should find in your folder everything that you'll need today, PowerPoint presentation, handouts, also a list of where Dr. Rhonda Johnson will be doing some upcoming training so that you can pass that along to your friends. And don't forget to just get on Eventbrite and type in the search bar Gladney University and look at all the fun things we also have coming up for the rest of the year. How many of you are here for the very first time? Oh my gosh, that is incredible. Thank you so much. This is exactly what we hoped would happen, that more and more people would learn about Gladney University and all the wonderful topics that we offer for medical professionals, for counseling staff, for social workers. This is a great place to come and do some networking and a wonderful place to get CEUs. And of course, we have great snacks. So, you know, that is the most important thing. I know that we're all ready to get down to it today, so I'm not going to take up any more of your time. Dr. Rhonda Johnson, would you join me up here, please? And Nick Johnson, would you also join me up here? Thank you so much. So I'm very excited to introduce to you Dr. Rhonda Johnson. Dr. Johnson has been with us several times before, and this is why the room is full. She's great at what she does. I'm happy to have her here with us today. She's the owner of the Center for Counseling and Family Relationships. Well, so there are fun facts that I always ask our speakers to give me, and Rhonda's is that she is a Gladney mom. She has a beautiful 12-year-old daughter whom she adopted from Gladney, and so she's part of the great big Gladney family. Welcome, Dr. Rhonda Johnson.
Thank you. Thanks. Well, I will start us out today. We've already had a few questions at the office, and Nick is not related to me, just to answer that right now. So we've had some questions going around. So yes, I want to answer that. So yes, I own the Center for Counseling and Family Relationships. We're on the north side of Fort Worth, so on the other side. And I've had the practice for 11 years now. So I've been in private practice for about 19 years is what I've been doing. And so in the last 6 years, really how today came about, it's been a journey in itself that they've been able to be a part of it with me, all the staff that we've got. But in the last 6 years, I've known that we've been really limited in how we've been able to help families and to help the children that we work with and the way that we do counseling. It was really on my heart when I started the practice that we really meet the needs of the community. And in order to do that, that really meant being in network with insurance and being able to get as many people through, as we could to be able to get them the help that they needed. But in the long run, that limited us, and so today we've been able to have some things come about within the last year that I'm really excited about, and that's part of what we're going to share with you today. In addressing trauma with children and parents is some new things that we're starting to do, and it will give you some tools as well, hopefully in the places where you're at. So whether you're a family, with an adopted child, or whether you're a professional that's working with adopted children, it'll give you some tools and some things to move forward with and hopefully help you think through some things and give us some reminders, because we all need those all the time as well. I know I do. So the way that we used to do things is that we had the parent session for the first session, and then the second and third session we would see the child, and the fourth session we would see the parent again. And in doing that, from that point forward, we would work with the child, but we were really limited on how often we could get a parent in, on how much information we could share with them. There was lots of information that they needed. We were trying to point them towards resources, but we could only do so much just because we were so booked out and we didn't have the opportunity to get them in more frequently. So part of this journey started way back when, and I'll show you some pictures. So back when I was a child, I really had a blessing of an opportunity to be a part of a family, and the family that I grew up in, one of our parents was able to be involved in some things that allowed me to be exposed to children from the hard places at a very young age. And so adoption and foster care And children from hard places was not new to me. That was something that we were around all the time. This is actually a picture of a ski trip that we ended up going on where we would take the children with us. And so there was a whole group of children. So when I was, younger, people used to, this was back when they kind of started a national movement that they would show a child on Wednesdays on the networks, and it would be a child that needed to be adopted, and people would call in if they were interested. And so my parent was able to help start that process that then became a nationwide thing that they started doing. So we would take some of the trips, they would show the children, we had them come through our home and different things like that. And I remember even at points in time, different people would call in wanting to adopt me, and that was the big joke by the time I was a teenager, was you should have taken the chance while you had it. So they did not. I'm still part of my family, thankfully. So I am the one in the little red jumpsuit in the front. So those are my early years back when I was 5. So just having that blessing of being able to be a part of knowing about adoption really early on in life definitely had an impact on me. And that's when a lot of my journey really began. In going to school, there was a lot of family systems background through all of my schooling that I did, which just means everyone in a family is involved. Like, you can't just change one person, and we all know that, and that everything, ends up magically, changing overnight. So it's a matter of being involved with as many people as you can and being able to work with them in that way. And so that was the background then. Then I have the adoption background that Karen mentioned. So this is my family right here. This is the back of us. So you've got Team Johnson. So we married in 01, so that's the 2001, and she was drafted in 06, was what we ended up saying. So yes, my husband's very creative. That is not me. So that came from him. And so then it keeps rotating. And this is us today, just so that you can get a picture of what she looks like now. So we've been on the journey now. She's 12, so the exciting middle school years. That sometimes I question how exciting they are. So trying to work through those. And then just other things that came into the mix of helping me with the foundation and just what's led to today is really doing the TBRI training, which those of you who've done it, it's like 60 plus, hours going through that. And so being able to do that. The RPT, just the registered play therapist background, and then supervising lots of people in lots of different settings. And so in all those different things, I kept being, confronted and realizing what a need, that there was in working with families and in working with those who are working with families, and being able to really have some practical help that could get a little bit further, and wasn't just the knowledge, which is sometimes where we can get stuck because we know, but trying to convey that information and get that information across to families sometimes is what's more difficult, and wanting them to understand. So what's happened for us in the last several years, just with the practice itself, is that we have been turning away about 100 clients a month for over a year. And so in the midst of that, we're in the process of expanding, so I'm super excited for that to be done. We'll have 7 playrooms that are over 200 square feet. They're half and half rooms, so I'm super excited about that. And we've got 11 counselors. And so the way that we're doing things today is what I'll show you now that we've got the staffing to be able to do it, and we've got, the facility, the practice to be able to do it. And so it's all part of that. What we really started doing and developing as we went along is looking at how we could connect with parents more and get them more information, and also be able to work with the families too. And when Nick comes up a little bit later, he's the one who will give you some of those ideas when it comes to the families themselves. And what I'll give you are some of the tools that you can use with the parents when you're one-on-one with them. It can be in a family session. It can be, in lots of different places that it can be used. And so we'll use it that way. So the first thing that we ended up changing is we added in what are called PG sessions. So it's parent guidance sessions. And so some of the things we'll go through today, I'll point out those all are what get incorporated into those. So we figure out what is, the parent actually figures out what need they have the most, like what they're lacking in the most, what information they need the most. And so we get that information to them so that they can be able to take some steps forward just as parents, and it's not just us working with the child. And then the other thing that we've incorporated is the family counseling. So instead of kind of doing the maintaining that we were trying to do for a very long time, and we did help, many children along the way, but I'm really excited about how far we can take it now, that we have some things set up and have a foundation to do that. So when you're looking at parents and thinking about parents that you work with, There's 5 different types, really, that, and thinking through who we worked with all together. And so I'll give you those, and then we'll start into the packet that you've got today, and we'll walk through what those different tools are. And I've got one more picture. I missed that one. This is the whole family. So this is everyone together. So everyone has ended up in some type of helping profession in one way or another. So it came very honestly to all of us, for sure. So the 5 types of parents go to, the first one is they're engaged, but they're not informed. So you know that they would be willing, to make some changes. You know that they would be willing to do some things to help their child or, to help their family, but they need that information. And so it's you getting them that information. We okay? The second type is engaged or disengaged. And so that one is one that has a lack of parenting skills, or they've had their own trauma that they have been through too. And so they may have experienced some that's keeping them from being the parent that they need to be. The third type is overwhelmed or overindulging. So I know you know some of those too. So they're parenting either out of their own needs, or that may be also out of their own trauma as well. So it may mean more to them to have their child be happy than it does to be able to do what they need to do to help them get a little bit further. An example of that would be, my daughter has been in mathnasium tutoring, or was for several years, and so we were kind of there all the time, basically. And one time I was sitting by a mom, and the owner brings the mom over to me because he knows I'm a lifer at that point, and so we're sitting there, and she starts saying, well, I hope she enjoys being here. I hope she has fun. I hope she wants to be. I'm like, this is math tutoring. This is not Disneyland. So, I mean, it's the thing of having to make that decision of you're wanting to do what's best for your child, even though you know they may not enjoy it. It may not feel good, and it really is not happy as a parent, to have your child unhappy beside you. We really want usually to give our best, to our children, and a majority of parents do, but it's having to look at the long term versus the short term, of what's easy, in the moment, and we all get stuck there. So that's another type of parent. The fourth one is when there's parent conflict, and so that may be they're maybe divorced parents, and they're more focused on each other than they are on what's best for the child, and being able to help them through a situation, and so it's having to move that perspective back, to the child so that they can put them first. And the fifth one is the overwhelmed or a lack of investment. And so that may be when you see a relative who didn't necessarily want to become a parent, but they chose to take on a child that they did not give birth to because either CPS has become involved, or maybe there's been a death, or maybe there's been, an incarceration, or something else has taken place. I know we've had some like that as well, and I've had many stories like that. So sometimes that is life choices that someone else made that then has brought on for that parent carrying the load, of having a child who's been from a hard place. So those are different types, just to give you a perspective of what we may see, and I'm sure some of the things that you may see, in the parents that you work with and as you go along. The first page that you've got in your packet, what it is it's a timeline of my child's life. Okay.
Just so we can hear you in the room.
Yes.
Yes. I'm just going to use this one.
Perfect. You want to take this one back?
Sure.
Okay.
Awesome.
Thanks. Technical glitches. Thank you for being patient. Okay. So for the timeline of my child's life at the top is what it has. What we've done is we created this so that you could use it with a parent as well. And so at the bottom, it has timeline of my life. So in looking through that list, you can look through and see what are some of the things that might apply even to you. Things that you may have been through, or you may want to think about, someone that you've worked with, a family that you have currently, and a child that you work with currently. So it has a lot of different transitions, and sometimes we forget about these when we're, as parents or as adults, they're thinking about, well, we've moved on to the next thing. They're not thinking about the impact that the last thing, if they're at a new school, or maybe they moved to a new neighborhood, but it was a better neighborhood, or maybe it's been a lot of trauma from the past. It can be anything. Change becomes so hard for the kiddos from the hard places, and especially those even from adoption, I know. And especially just that piece of they're wanting people in their life that are stable and that they can hold on to. And so any of those types of transitions make it even more difficult. And it's also things that change around them. So, I mean, these can be environmental. It also goes, we're in the new school year, you have a new teacher, every year. You have new classmates, you have new peers in your room, along with all the things that you've been through. So all of us are dealing with change all the time. But when you've been through trauma and when you've been through a hard place, it's even more. It's on top of everything else that they may have experienced through their life that didn't have stability with it. And so whereas you may see others who can adapt really easily, and maybe they can make friends much easier, and they can be able to relate and make relationships, get closer relationships faster. For them, it's that struggle of, and I had a little boy in my office yesterday, his struggle was that, he has some friends this year, but he's choosing not to eat lunch with them because he knows they're going to be gone next year. And I'm not sure why they know that. I didn't even get to that part of how he knows they're going to be at a different school. But it was like, I'm not even going to attempt, to continue or to make memories or to have that relationship because I know I'm going to lose it soon. So it's not even worth it, which definitely leaves him isolated and alone right now. And those are things that we're working through. But it brings on that much fear and anxiety, of just that loss. We all know what loss feels like because we've all experienced it. So this can help you with a parent in not only having them look at their child, but also in being able to look at themselves and some of the things that they may have been through that they could understand, or put themselves in their child's shoes. I know we had a family come through and it was a hard situation. It was a parent who had been deployed, a single parent, and it was too hard for her when the child was an infant to FaceTime with the infant, even though she could have. And so this child went a lot of early months within the first 2 years without a lot of contact with biological mom because of this situation. And they were living with, someone else in the family. But it's created, even though the child's older now, and it was in the home and is not adopted and not necessarily trauma from a hard place, it's trauma from that loss, and not having had that relationship. And that's, part of what we, help parents understand too, is just even if they've had a child, and I think that's what confuses parents a lot too, even if they've had a child since birth, I had my daughter since she was 12 days old, but there's still pieces, that come back that I can see, and I'll talk through some of those today, that still impact life, that still impact our family, even though we've used it very much as a positive, and adoption being such a positive thing that she was chosen, and that we were able to become parents through her, and through Gladney, is still that piece of being able to recognize and acknowledge the background and where she's from, and the impact that it has on today. So it's something that parents have to continue to do. It's not just a story that you tell, the then you leave in the past, or that they have knowledge of like it's a fact. It's more of something that impacts daily life for them and can impact, each stage of life. Things will come up that are new, even if they master it in one stage, some things may come up in another stage, and helping them recognize that as well. The next page that you've got is the Parent's Guide to Trauma. And so I'll let you look through this. We'll walk through it together. It's letting you know about some of the long-term, effects that come from trauma. This is more that education piece, of giving parents that information. It's a quick sheet that you can use to be able to help them. It's helping them understand the fight or flight, the body's alarm system, and that fight or flight mode that can easily happen for them just when they don't feel safe. It's not when we recognize that they don't feel safe, it's when they don't feel safe. And so you may look at their environment and know that they're perfectly fine. And I think that's what happened with my little boy, yesterday, as his aide was like, you had a great period, you should be fine. But for him, he's falling apart, internally, and things are not fine, and he's not okay, and he's wanting everyone else to know that as well. So there's the hyperarousal, And so that's the being easily startled. It's those anger outbursts that you may see. It's the irritability, the feelings of panic and anxiety, insomnia, low pain tolerance, tiredness, poor concentration, and being constantly on guard. So one of my not awesome mom moments, I'll tell on myself, was not long ago. My daughter had some, I think it was receipts or something, I don't even know what it was. But at that moment, they were being asked for by someone else, and she got that look. It's that freeze look that you know, where the eyes are really wide, and she can't, like literally is blank. She has no idea, like where they are. And with us all being tired and in the middle of some stressful moments that we were going through right then, I'm like, well, where did you put them? Where did you put them last? All of those questions that come out that you shouldn't do. Yeah, all the things you shouldn't do, that's what I did. And so I'll tell myself. So we're in the kitchen, and so I'm continuing like trying to get her to think, I'm trying to get her to, so I could help. Like, where might it be? Is it in this trash can, that trash can? Like, we're thinking through all the different places. She has gotten herself into the corner of the kitchen as I am, continuing to get closer. And she finally just burst out and says, "You're bullying me!" so as my husband comes in and is like, "She's just parenting you." So, that made me feel a little better. I had some support. But walking away from that, I even myself knew, wow, all those things I'm not supposed to do, and all those triggers, that can trigger her so easily, of that anxiety being set really high. If we had left it and maybe come back to it, we did end up finding them. Life did not end, and we found they were in a trash that was findable. so we did do that. But it's just the point of, in those moments, we all stay busy. It gets stressful. We all have structure. There are time frames. And so if you think about how stressed you may be, and then you have parents who have children from the hard places, who also have a lot of alarm systems going off all the time, it's just that much more, that they're trying to take care of, and that they're trying to manage and do the best that they can as well. What you've got on the collapse response is that long-term trauma may lead to that collapse response, which is isolation, withdrawal, daydreaming, disconnection from reality, and then the feelings of boredom. And I think feelings of boredom is probably what I personally hear most often. I would think, like, just in the playroom and just from parents. It's that piece of they're so overstimulated all the time, and that's a whole other training on screens and how much stimulation we have all the time. But between just media, around us, that's around us all the time, and then having been through trauma and being stimulated by whatever traumatic events that they went through, it's just this constantly being on all the time. So if I have to sit still with my thoughts, I know a lot of adults that don't want to sit still with their thoughts. I'm sure that's none of you. Because if we sit still for even 30 minutes, I know that, one thing I like to do is run. And guess what? All this stuff starts running through my head, all these things I've forgotten to do or need to do or, need to put into place, or, all those different things, they start coming to my head. And I'm trying to remember them all by the time I get back so that I can hurry and write them down by the time I get back. So it ends up, being that we don't take that much time to really sit and process, and to think through what could be impacting right now. What are we involved in that may be working, or what maybe we may be involved in that is not working? So what is not, what can we do to improve? And so that's what part of working with families allows you and can allow you to do, is just to sit back, to look in at they're feeling the pressure of all the things that have to be done to be a good parent. And they may have to take a step back from what those expectations are for another family to look at what is going to mean at the end a win for them, which really, ultimately, I think all of us know, is still having a relationship with your child. In the end, can they get to 18? And it's not about, did they make it to college? It's about, did you invest in them to the point that they still want that relationship with you and they still want to continue? And helping a parent realize how to get there. They'll hear a lot of other things to focus on, in the world around us. And so it's helping them be able to tighten that perspective back in, and recognize ways that they can do that in the process. It talks about trauma causes problems with attachment. You know that, with a child and with a caregiver. So we all know that. It's trying to figure out what we can do about it. There's the avoidant attachment. And so that's when there's the avoidance of eye contact, withholding physical contact, or sabotaging positive interactions. There's overactivated attachment. That one I heard a story about just this last week. So there's the clinginess and the need for attention, the separation anxiety, and sometimes there's even that jealousy towards siblings. So I know I had some twins who had been adopted from overseas, and I had them together, and this little girl that I had, precious, but she just could not get past her twin sister, and how life was so much better, for this twin, and how much more she was favored, and how much more she was given. And we all know that that's not the case, but it's that perspective that she had of how much better things were, for her sister, who was older by however many minutes, and I guess we'll never really know that, but, but in her mind. So not knowing that whole story, we'll never really know. And then there's just disorganized attachment. And so those responses include the lack of sensitivity towards others, the poor regulation of mood and behavior that may come about, and then at the bottom you've got the citing. Part of another thing that allowed today to come about is that we were asked to train a PHP IOP child adolescent program nearby. And in being able to train all of their staff, their real need at that point in time was being able to do a family session, because they were limited on how many they could do, without it being just relying on talk therapy. And so just trying to talk to a family and jump in and 3 sessions later have made a difference. So really today, came about in a lot of those steps towards finding ways and things that they could use and tools they could use to try to help them, which then ended up rolling into things that we're implementing even in our practice that we can take even further than they could take, because they're so limited in the time frame that they've got. And part of what allowed all of that to come about was really in the last year, a couple of counselors that were on staff went to an EMDR training. And I had heard about EMDR, I knew about EMDR, I'd heard about people that had done EMDR, but in my mind, it didn't necessarily match with the faith foundation that I have. And so I knew that that might not be something I wanted to pursue. And honestly, there just wasn't, I'd never really seen a training, that was on it, that was a shortened version that could just explain what it was. So when they came back and started talking about it, my eyes got really big. Because all of a sudden I was seeing these clients that I've worked with for years, some of them adults who have been through a lot of trauma, more than any one person should experience in a lifetime by any means. And so with some of them, I started thinking through, what, I'm willing to make this attempt, and go through this training to see if this is something that could really help them. I wasn't even necessarily thinking about all the children, that I work with, as much as some of these adults, that I would love for them at the age of 50 to find some kind of peace in life, who have been through the worst trauma that you can go through for years and years and years, decades even, and being able to help them find some freedom, that I know how I view life and the perspective that I have on it, and that it can have some peace and some joy, and it's not full of anger and resentment, and bitterness 24 hours a day. And in wanting them to have that, that was really what spurred that on and pursuing that. So a couple days later, I went to a training, and then another person on staff said, I will go with you. So we ended up going. Well, by the end of all of us talking, through all of this and coming back, so excited and ecstatic about what it could mean and what it can do and what some of the tools that it can offer. And a lot of what we look at today, you'll see it cited with EMDR books, and that's why. So by the time December comes, we'll have 7 of the 11 counselors that we have on staff that are trained. And so I'm really excited about that, because we're able to offer some things that we weren't before. And I have seen it change the lives of some of these adults that I work with, even yesterday and talking with one of them. It's the first time that we didn't do EMDR and just had a talk session where she's talking through things, that it didn't turn into who to blame, or about how my life has been. It really became just a conversation about what my life has been like, and that it doesn't have to be my identity. It's a part of who I am, but I'm able, to look past that as well. And I have more hope than I ever have before, that she can be able to have some healthy relationships in her life, something that she hasn't really had, to this point outside of really close family. So that's something that I've seen change. So that's another part of what led us to today. Some of these resources, they're just not known. If you haven't done an EMDR training, or you don't fully understand it, or you haven't read through the books, and they can be, some of them complicated and hard to understand, that there are so many of the tools that you can use that don't include having to be fully trained, with the stimulation. And so that's part of what we'll walk through today. So even some of this came from it, because that's rooted in trauma, and in people who've been through hard places, children and adults, just as much as TBRI, just as much as, that TheraPlay background that TBRI has. So what we do today incorporates all of it, and that's a lot of what we'll look at, just so you know where it comes from. So I've tried to cite a lot of it at the bottom, but just so you know. And the next page has its character traits I want my child to have. So often when parents come in, obviously there's a problem. They know what they want worked on, or what they're hoping will change. It's not necessarily about coming in thinking they need more information or wanting more information. They're one of those 5 types of parents that I described. So they may be wanting that, they may not. And something that, really has been on my heart, just from influence of background and even, my church background and different things, has been not to focus so much on behavior and to look more at the character. If you can help a parent broaden their perspective off of, they don't brush their teeth and they don't pick up their clothes and they don't do their homework and, everything is no. If you can go a little bit further into what's the character trait that we're wanting them to have to be able to have healthy relationships, to be able to move into adulthood, as smoothly as possible, and to have some of those. So that's where this list really came from. So on there it has the thinking of others, responsibility, listens to those in charge, honest, making good choices, uses positive words, a positive attitude, controlling emotions, positive relationships, and ask forgiveness. And so when parents come in, if this is something that they're needing, is a little help on being able to have some more structure at home, is we're letting them pick 2 of those, to look at, instead of getting really, minimizing down to the last detail, of what the problem may be, is taking a really broad perspective on how can we tackle this and what would it look like, if they had some of these character traits. And even further than that, I'm sure some of you know, is at the bottom half is having the parent look at themselves. So how often have you had a child and you know that they have a struggle or something that they're struggling with, but at the same time you can see those exact same traits in the parent? So I'm seeing some shaking heads. So we can see it at the window, the interaction as they're checking in, and I'm watching them interact with my staff, and we're a team and like a family, and that I'm like a mama bear. It makes me want to, do something about it at that point. Like, that's not how we treat people. And so it's getting enough time with a parent so that we can help to build into them and have them evaluate themselves as well. So what are the couple of traits that you're wanting your child to work on? And then do you possess those couple of traits as things that you need to work on? And how can you all work on that together? Instead of it being something that a child has a problem that they're needing to work on, and please fix them, for me, like they're broken, is looking at, as a family, like, how can we become more connected, and closer? And what are things that we can be doing to help each other and to help hold each other accountable? So that's what that one can be used for. So it's set up similar, in the past, like a behavior chart would have been. And I'll give you something later on that we'll get to where you can plug it in. But it's a start. Underneath the child's character traits and goals, it has that question that we like to refocus on. What are 2 traits about your child that you appreciate the most? When parents come in, it's usually a critical moment. With us in our system, the way we were, where we were booked out 2 and 3 months, and it took forever to get in to see us, things by then are definitely, pretty critical. And so the focus is on the negative a majority of the time. And if you can help change that perspective, so if you're a parent, and you're dealing with the struggle watching this, would be that part of recognizing, what are the things that I cherish about them? From my viewpoint, God made them, and they're special, and they have special traits about them, and we all were made uniquely. And so what are those things that are unique to them? Because even when my daughter's driving me crazy, there are still things that are really unique to her, that are giftings that I'm never gonna have, ever. You know, I could never think the way she does, and I couldn't see things the way she does, and I couldn't have that perspective. So it's recognizing all of us have a unique background. We were given that, and we've got to be able to see those positives at the same time that we're seeing those negatives. Because when they're hearing negatives over and over and over and over and over and over and over, and you know they're hearing it all day at school because they're meant to sit at a desk, you know, for a long, long, long time. And so it's helping a parent be able to recognize, yes, school may be a hard place, you know, for them, and it may be just getting through the day, and they're needing a safe place to come home to. You know, is your home, do they feel like it's a safe place? You know, where they are loved, and yes, they're structured, and yes, you have expectations, but at the same time, underneath that is that foundation, you know, of knowing that they're loved. And so that's a big piece. At the bottom of the parents' ones, it has the parent character traits and goals. It says, choose 2 chores that you want your child to have responsibility for. So if they use 2 from the top that they pick out, and then you could bring in, usually a lot of things parents, you know, bring up have to do with things they need to be doing, whether it's homework or help around the house or whatever it is. Then they can tag, you know, some of those on as well. But I really like for a parent to have as broad a perspective as possible on really building into what are those character traits, because none of us are perfect. I could identify myself on several of these right now on things that I, you know, still need to work on, still need to grow in, you know, still need to be molded and changed, and being able to be open to that. And how can I do that as well as set an example for my child in the process? Because we know that an example that a parent sets is going to mean way more than anything I say. I could say it 10 sessions in a row and it won't make a difference. But if a parent can example it and they're with them 24 hours a day, how much of a difference, you know, does that make? So, I mean, I had a parent catch me in the weight room last week, and the child had to be hospitalized for some suicidal ideation, and she just in the weight room, and I know it was not intention, but it grabs me really quick, and she's like, do you think it's okay for this to happen now? And that was not quite the right place to talk about it. So we went back to my office, but that's where I really remind them, I'm like, you're the expert, like you're around him all the time. You know, I'm with him a snippet of time. So let's talk through what are the options and the compromises. He really loves pocket knives, and he was wanting to have his pocket knife collection back. And so we talked through like what that looked like and what the options were. But for her, it was like a yes or no, I'm the expert, I should have the answer, you know, throw it out there and he's gonna be safe. And that's not quite how it always works. So we came up with something, but I really encouraged the mom, you know, to talk with the dad more, because I'm more concerned about them being on the same page and on being able to carry it out at home than I am for her to go home and say, well, Dr. Johnson says we should do this, and then he doesn't agree, and we've got this divided front going with the child who's in the middle. That's not gonna help either. So you're really wanting to unite the parents, you know, with the child as much as you can, as much as possible in the process. The next one has the parenting growth areas. And so this is what we're really honing in on our parent guidance sessions. So for us, and for me, I really believe that everything parenting-wise comes back down to these 3 categories. So there's communication, and then there's the connection, and then there's the boundaries. And those 5 types of parents that we talked about earlier are all gonna fit within one of those. It's gonna be maybe one more than another, and you're wanting them to choose one more than another because we can't change everything, and you may be really limited on the amount of time you're gonna get with a parent to be able to do this. So if you've only got a couple of times and you know that's all you've got, is being able to have them identify, you know, walking through these and having them be really honest with themselves about where they're struggling the most. So a lot of times as parents, you know, we're going through the rush of things and they hear some of these things, but it's not necessarily all in one spot where they can hone in on what's that one thing, you know, that I could be doing right now. They just need one, don't give them 30. You know, like it is so overwhelming. They just need, you know, one. I know my daughter's been going through some GI issues, and we've been on this road. I can tell you all about the Cook system at this point. So we've been on it since the spring and have done the gamut. And so in the end, you know, our journey last week, you know, led to, you're gonna hear from a nutritionist. And so I'm thinking, great, you know, like we'll make an appointment, we'll sit down, we'll talk through like all my different options, and like, here's what you can, here's what you can't. All these different things. Well, that's not how it went. So I got a phone call, And 25 minutes into the phone call, I am checked out. Like, I don't have a handout. She keeps referencing a handout she's going to send me that I haven't seen yet. And she is just past my head. I mean, it is, you know, no dairy, no carb, no sugar. No, I'm just, this one, I'm like, that's everything that you can eat. So I'm totally, you know, it's past me at this point. So I ended up, you know, we ended the conversation, but it was just that thought. It's always so good for me to have those reminders of like, this is what parents feel like. It's so much information, and it's so much to try to implement, and it's so much to try to do at one point in time. If we had just started with one of those lists instead of the 12 pages I ended up with, maybe I would have felt a little bit more like I could accomplish it. So thankfully, my husband can have a really big perspective, whereas I get bogged down in the details really easily. And he's like, oh, we can handle this, just like he does everything. So we're navigating it. We're getting there after my Kroger run last night. But the whole point is just that there are so many things, you know, to learn and so much information to share, that if you can have them narrow down on what's going to be most meaningful to them, not what you think is most meaningful for them, but what they think is most meaningful, then hopefully you'll be able to get some of that honesty, you know, going for them as well on what are the things that I really need to work on as a parent. Instead of a defensiveness of, I am doing everything I can. You know, do you not see that I have tried and tried, and I'm bringing them here and I'm bringing them there, and I'm taking them to everyone I can take them to that I've been referred to. But some of it goes back to home, and just those reminders. It's not that every parent is not trying to implement things at home, but it's just good to have reminders. We all need them. So if you'll have them pick, is it communication that they're struggling with? And I'll give you a sheet to go with that we'll get to in just a minute. Is it connection? You know, when school starts, it's crazy. Like, I completely understand, you know, of so much time goes into the events and the homework and all these different things. And the older your child gets, the more the expectations are, wherever they're at. And you can lose that connection really easy and really quickly. The boundaries that are there is just for some of the parents who just don't know. Either boundaries weren't set for them, or I have some parents where boundaries were way too strict, and so they run the opposite direction. And you know what I'm talking about. So, I mean, we all have that tendency when we have experiences. We either can, you know, sway that same exact direction, or we can sway the exact opposite way. And we're always trying for a middle ground. And so it's helping them remember, like, there are healthy boundaries that you can set. And for those that just aren't sure what that can look like, some of them are really wanting to, that it's just beyond, you know, comprehension, and they still may be stuck in what they grew up with and what it should be like, instead of recognizing the need of the child, you know, that they have, and who, you know, they've been able to parent, especially a child who's been adopted, you know, or from a hard place. So at the bottom it has, what are your goals for working on your 3 growth areas? And then it has the SMART goals, because it's always good if you can help them come up with, what does that even look like? Like, we can talk about it and we can say it, you know, but what does that even really mean? The next one is the mirror analogy. And this one is if a parent is just really lacking some of that basic information. And so being able to expose them to hearing a little bit more about how their child may be wired and what's happened to them in childhood. So I'll walk through a little bit of this one. So it says, when we come into this world, we have a brain, a body, and a nervous system ready to be shaped by experience and the environment and it encounters. So we have all the ingredients to form a sense of self, but we need experiences from those closest to us to form and develop a conscious sense of self, since we do not have one yet. So as we know, some of the adults and some of the children that we work with didn't get those experiences early on. You know, they were wired for that. You know, when they came into this world, you know, that they had what they needed for that. But some of the experiences and the trauma and the relationships and some of the hardships along the way definitely impact that. In that middle section, it talks about our parents' words and actions, internal states, facial expressions, presence or absence mirror who we are and what we are worthy of in life. So it's not your viewpoint and not their viewpoint as a parent, and if you're a parent, not your viewpoint, but it's the child's viewpoint of what they feel like they're worthy of. You know, how do they view themselves? Something I heard at one point in time is kind of coming up with what are all the things that you have heard about yourself? Those negative things that you've heard throughout life. And if I had you jot some of those down, we could come up with probably quite a list. And we also, if I ask you the positive and negative traits about you, would probably tell me your negatives first. Because we hear those and we remember those, they stick, more than the positives do. Because we can hear those positives, but we gloss past them when another negative pops in. So it's helping parents recognize that. And it's talking about, that the files are usually locked. That's part of EMDR background. If you don't know much about that, is that those memories can get what we say locked in the brain. And so what it's doing is it's saying when these files are open or activated, all the emotions and bodily sensations and beliefs about ourselves are also in a state of activation. And that's why you're getting the overreaction, to anything that happens, because it's just one more thing piled onto all of these other things that they haven't fully been able, to deal with or to unlock or to recognize, or they're just too young. I mean, they're kids. It's a matter of how old are they and can they even grasp and understand? So you're helping a parent recognize that and reminding them of that. And says this causes us to have emotions, thoughts, and bodily sensations in the present that are reminiscent of the past experience we had with important mirror figures in our lives. So if you think through, who are some of those mirror figures in your life, like good or bad? Take a minute to think through, like who really impacted me? They either breathed life into me and helped me see the traits that I had that were unique and special, or who are those people that maybe tore me down and didn't make me feel like I was worthy? So I know that we all have experiences. Whether you've been through a hard place or not, we've had interactions with people. And guess what? We are all flawed. And so it's that part of knowing, if we can be that mirror that's a positive and trying to build into kids, and as parents trying to build into kids, we'll always get a lot further than we do on tearing down and on seeing that negative. At the end, it says, with this being said, I would like you to take a minute to just notice what your child may see on this mirror on a daily basis. That's a hard one. If I had to write down all the things that my daughter sees on this mirror on a daily basis when she's interacting with me, growing up, she'd be going, this is mommy. Guess what I'm doing? I'm typing because I'm always working. And so it's that part, for us, my husband was very wise, and that something he implemented or encouraged me to implement, he didn't implement it. Early on, when she was young, 2 and 3, it's like, Rhonda, you've got to find, something that you can connect with Kayleen, something that helps unite you guys when you come home, apart from work, apart from all the responsibilities, apart from everything you're doing. And at that point in time, she's gotten a little old for it, it was wrestling. We would get on the bed and pretend to wrestle. For girls, it wasn't real wrestling. It was more like kind of shoving on the bed. But do you know she's 12 and she still likes to do that? She's like, Mom, can we wrestle and snuggle? If I can remember and take the time before we start on homework, she really loves to do nose kisses. It's all the little things that at an age of 12, like that's not cool to do in front of your friends. There's no way she would do any of that in public. But at home, it still has meaning for her. And it still builds life into her, and we're connecting. She's right in my face, and she says I have bad breath the majority of the time. But she still wants it, and she still cares. And it's a way of me being able to connect with her versus wanting something from her, which is, I'm sure, what it feels like a big bulk of the time. So I know we all feel like that. We get to work, and if someone's grabbing you and then someone else wants something, or you have all the pressure of everything that you have to get done, it gets overwhelming. And they feel the same way. And in a relationship with us as parents, or in a relationship with us as a professional, trying to help their parents, is wanting them to see that big picture of what is that Russell snuggle nose kiss. It may not be that for you, and it probably wouldn't be if you had a boy. But for us, that has a lot of meaning. And hopefully it will. I'll hope it does for a long time, and that it won't leave. So that's part of that mirror analogy. She can see a lot of things, but if I can start out with some kind of ritual, and that's where the I Love You ritual book can come in, on things that we can implement that just connect. The minute that you walk in, to be able to get past, some of the things that you're going to have to tackle, or some of the things they did that day that you're going to have to talk about, or some of those things. So at the bottom it says, what do you think your child needs to see, feel, or hear about himself or herself? What did your child receive early on from you and others to form files about the self, about you, and about the world? With a lot of these kiddos, and even with my daughter, if I start, or a parent starts, either way, start talking about something that needs to be dealt with or worked on, a lot of times there can be like this shut down, gloss over, and I know you know what I mean as a parent. And so it's that piece of, a lot of times it's not necessarily that they're not hearing or even that they don't care, but we are triggering back, to some of the locked memories, and it's just that fight or flight, like not knowing how to respond. And so as you're trying to engage in what looks like lack of response or not caring, on their part, really has more to do with so much anxiety has shot up, but they really mask it super well. I mean, they've been living, with trauma for a lifetime. And so being able to hide those things, can look to us like things are fine on the outside, but to them, they're definitely not fine on the inside. And that goes back even into personality, type of like, are they going to process it slower? Are they going to process it faster? Are they going to lash out? Or are they going to shut down? You can see all types of different responses. And they all go back to what we were talking about with the alarm system and helping parents be able to recognize that. If they feel like they know what's going on and they have the information that they need from all of you, or from even watching this training today, then they're going to feel more equipped to be able to step back than they are when they feel like they're the only ones trying to fix it or solve it in the moment, and they have to do it right now, because everything feels like right now. The next one is the thermostat analogy. So for that one, it's helping parents to remember, so a child learns to manage and regulate their emotions by watching their parents manage and regulate their own emotions. And that's how we learn. So if the mirror analogy isn't something that really fits your style, or fits, a way for you to talk about it, then the thermostat might be one that could even be more helpful, because that's something we have in every building, hopefully, in every place if the air conditioning is working in the heat of Texas. So it says the combination of genetics and environment the child has been exposed to since or before birth, because remember we've got the 9 months leading up to birth, it's not since they went into your home, that those shape the way the thermostat responds to life's demands. So those self-regulating behaviors that we see of aggression, like gaze avoidance, I'm not going to look at you, stealing, hoarding, defiance, thumb-sucking, rocking, and even self-injury are actually attempts to regulate that thermostat that they've got inside of them. So a lot of times we look at those, they're all the symptoms, that we see, and we focus more on those than we even may on what's behind that, which is where's that worth? What are they seeing? What are they hearing from us? What are we exempling? Are we building life into them? And then it gives you some questions afterward that you could be able to use with a parent on, like, can you tell me about your own thermostat and your ability to use it when you experience high and low emotional states? So if a parent's been able to identify where they're needing help, and communication can tie into that, and connection, then things like this, to be able to help them explore, it's more than information, then it's taking it to the level of having them really personalize it, to figure out where they may need to improve. says, do you go to the high emotional states such as anger or high anxiety or fear, or do you go to those low emotional states? So they're impacted by all of those. And it even talks about which ones are easier for you and your child to manage. So what do they see in their child? What do they see in themselves? And being able to evaluate it from both perspectives, and having them look at themselves. The next page that you've got is the one on communication. And this one is something you may already know, and you've known for a very long time because you've known it since school. But it is those very basics that the parents need to hear again and again and again. So if communication is the one that they highlight and say, this is where my biggest struggle is, then this may be a whole session worth on what does this look like. Because they can see it on a page, but being able to have those examples of how they're carrying it out and what it really looks like in real life can be the game changer, on being able to help things transform for that family and in that relationship with the parent and child. So tracking is that first one. That's the one from child-centered play therapy. If you have any of that background, you're just tracking what they're doing. You're noticing it. All it is saying, I see you, I care about you, I know you're here, and I know what you're doing. The reflecting content goes back to, we tend to, as parents, they come home, they tell a story, and we immediately jump in with, well, why did you do that? Well, did this person do that too? Well, it goes into all these questions. Instead of reflecting some of that content back of if they were really struggling with it, even if it was a wrong choice along the way, is being able to let them feel heard before we get into the parenting mode and being able to do that. The next one is reflecting the feelings, and that's positive and negative. I think that one's usually the hardest that I see when I'm working with parents to be able to implement, because it's much easier to jump into the situation and try to fix it or to teach than it is to be able to look at what they're really feeling in that moment or what might be going on for them. So that one's just picking up on face and body language. And I tell parents all the time, that's what we were doing when we're in sessions with the kids. And if you get it wrong, guess what? They're going to tell you immediately. So they're not going to wait, and they're not going to try to be, overly kind to you and pretend that that's really how they feel. They'll let you know. So they're not going to be bashful about it. But it's reflecting those feelings because you're just giving a voice. A majority of the time, I think what we see is that same struggle even with adults. Are we really stating what it is that's going on behind, the situation? And so with kids, they definitely a lot of times don't have that voice that they need to be able to state their emotions, to be able to tell what it is, that they're wanting. And if you can pick up on those, then they even feel more heard and understood. So you didn't just track me, you didn't just listen to the content of what I said. But now, even if I'm totally in the wrong, like you heard me and you listened to my feelings, right or wrong. The next one's the building confidence, and that's the affirmation instead of praising. So with that one, it's that part of play therapy when we're saying like, you did that exactly like you wanted to. You built that tower so high. You're so proud of what you accomplished. It's just highlighting what are those emotions, what are the things that they're doing, and instead of you giving approval of it, it's a matter of it being theirs, and it being part of their identity and their worth and not a part of you pleased me, as a parent. And the last one is the independence and responsibility. So that's where we're really encouraging. It's when I get a kiddo, for one reason or another that's pretty helpless, and would love for me to do everything for them. Can you get that down? Can you open this? And it's just those statements of like, I think that's something you can do for yourself. As parents, there are parents that I have that children can be, because they're not making the choices they need to be making that are age appropriate, they're trying to control all the things that shouldn't be in the realm, that are not age appropriate. So with a young child, if that's like choosing what goes in the lunchbox, or if that's choosing what pajamas they wear, or what clothes they're going to wear to school. Those are things that can be age appropriate at different ages, but then when it comes to like where we're going next, Or sometimes, it can be a matter of the next event or the next thing on the schedule. Those that they may not have as much control over, but they may want to. And so you're trying to make sure and evaluate what are all the choices that they do have so that they can actually see those. And it doesn't feel like everything's just happening to them all the time. So sometimes they're crippled. I mean, I have one, right now who definitely gets crippled, even at a choice of dinner, of choosing what to eat. But it's being able to offer them those opportunities, even if you narrow it down as a parent to 2 or 3, what they can handle. And sometimes it's still crippling initially as they're learning that independence. But the more that they're becoming independent in the age-appropriate things, the less that you'll see some of that wanting to control you, as a parent, or wanting to control everything around them, in the environment. So those are all the communication pieces, that you can go over and over and over, because we hear them. If you're from, a counseling background, you may even know them, but even as a parent is having to remind myself, on a daily basis, why is it so much easier for me to do it in the playroom than when I get home? Why is that? Because it's life. And those, at home, they know me. They know the real me. It's not just an hour with me. And so it's that side of having to recognize we all struggle with it. We all need that, just that connection and that communication, that goes along with it. I had a great reminder again last week, with my daughter going through her issues. She was about to have, we were at a surgical place for her to have some procedures done, and they're about to put her under. And of course, I was on my computer. Yes, she had 3 nurses around her, been preparing for things like today and other things. And so as the nurses left, I put it up, so that I knew she wasn't being hovered over all the way, and so I could give her attention. And do you know that I got up and I got towards her, and that nurse popped her head up, and she was like, "Did you see that?" I'm like, "What?" She was like, "Her heartbeat just changed. The minute that you got towards her and got close to her." And I think I was doing a nose kiss at that point. I don't really remember. But it was just that moment of the more that we're removed and distracted, which that goes into media as well for that one, the less of a relationship we have. But the moment that I put that up, and we were engaging and I'm in her face in a positive way, the more that her heart slowed down. And the nurse was I said, "Oh, it's screen time." And the nurse looks at me like, "What?" Well, when you're distracted and, you have something open that impacts the connection, she's just kind of nodding her head, "Okay." But it's just good for all of us to remember, at all times is that need for connection, for our kids to be able to have that. And how much, that's an embarrassing story to tell, that things like that happen to me all the time. And being able to have to remind myself of how important that they really are. The next page that you've got is parent questions in session. So if you're doing a family session and you're needing to bring out some things and you get stuck like I sometimes do, I'm like, how do I bring this, to the forefront? How do we have a discussion on this? What we did is we came up with some options for you on things that you could give a parent, and you could even give them the sheet to walk through together. So if the child is, not wanting to participate right then while the parent's there, or it's a family session and they're being really disruptive, which sometimes can happen. And so I know with the program that we went and trained them on, this is a pretty common occurrence. And so it was something that we helped develop for them. So it's, what are you noticing in your reactions right now as you observe what your child is doing? So that's something they can even use at home. Are they looking at themselves and what their responses are in the midst of what's going on? Or is it just a matter of all emotions are going to be unleashed really quickly? What do you notice your child may be experiencing right now? As in, are they tracking? Are they reflecting content? Are they reflecting feelings? What do you notice that your child may be needing right now or feeling right now? And as you notice what they're feeling and needing, what would you like to be able to do or say to your child? So in being able to give them something to take home, even if right after an incident they go back to this and they're having to think through, what could I have done differently? Because I even do that when I leave a session. Could I have said something? Maybe I should have picked up on that. Maybe I should have, we think through things and replay them, in our heads. And I'm not perfect either, as a mom or as a counselor. And it's being able to look at what are the things to be, to reevaluate and to be worked on. What's that next step, that I can take versus that overwhelming 12-page picture of all the things that need to change. Is what can I do right now? Near the end, it's when you responded, to your child's statement, what do you notice happening with your child? Did he or she calm down, or did they get more agitated? So did your child become more connected or more distanced? So in doing that communication, they're going to get some feedback pretty quickly just by seeing their child on how much that connection or communication is working and what's working and what's not working. And that's where, if you're a helping professional, you can come in and try to take those, to some further steps. And how can it go further? We head into TheraPlay on that next page. If you know much about TheraPlay, you'll see it highlighted in here. The basics, it's intertwined with the trust-based relational intervention training, if some of you have done that. And intertwined as in it looks at engagement as that first question, nurture is the second one, and then it has structure for the third one and challenge for the fourth one. And so we're looking at, when we come from this perspective of describe activities you and your child engage in together. I'm not shocked, when I talk with parents and we get a little bit further into what they may be considering the quality time or the engagement time. And when I'm hearing about it, if both of them are on an iPad and a phone, maybe in the same room at the same time, that's not necessarily where we're trying to get with the engagement or what we would want that to look like. So just asking surface questions of, do you get time with your child? Do you engage with your child? You may get a yes, but if you take it a little bit further, you may see that there's still some room. And so on this, it says no electronics, eye contact, or one-on-one, just to spell it out for them. So there could be room for improvement. The next one's describe how you nurture your child. And so that's where the physical, emotional, social, and spiritual may come in. Describe the structure you provide for your child at home. So what responsibilities do they have and how often? For this, I'm looking at it because some parents are way too far on the structure. For other parents, there may not be near enough, based on what their child's getting into and involved in when there's not structure. And the fourth one is describe how you challenge your child. So do you help them learn from natural consequences? Do you rescue, and fix it? How they're learning along the way. So some of these questions, even asking, could help to assess and get some more information. The next one's the parent's connection to the child. And so it's saying, please take some time to look at the interactions that you had with your child for the last 2 weeks. So this one, you draw a circle and you've got a graph. And you're dividing the time into how much you spent doing each of these things. So there's physical activities and nurturing play and play, but then it goes all the way down to doing homework and doing chores and separate activities in the same place. So having a parent really evaluate, and even for yourself personally, if you evaluated, how much of my time goes into work, how much goes into time with friends, whether you have kids or don't have kids, is something for all of us to look at. How do we blend life together? It's not always balancing. Sometimes it's blending. And in a matter of how do we blend those things together so that homework can have some nurturing with it, or so that I can combine some of my, needing to challenge myself in an area by taking a friend along with me, and having some incentive as I go and someone to encourage me along the way. So looking at those and really evaluating, what does a majority of my time go towards in life? What does that look like? And in being able to do that, it goes to the next page, which is the child's perspective. So this is where you get to compare the two. So if you do like a pizza on a marker board with your circle, and you just have a different color for each one, or for a few that you think they do more than another. You know, if it's an older, like a teen or a preteen, they can easily use the sheet, you know, themselves. But it's being able to help them. Are their perspectives even near the same? It's not that one is right or wrong. They both are going to look at it from different directions. And how can you connect those more together so that they are getting some of the connection in the midst of a lot of the things that are at the bottom, which is more the teaching and parenting and being separated, but not connecting. The next one has some follow-up connection questions. And so for this one, it's what are differences between how you and your parents see that you spend your time at home? So once you have the graphs, then you're able to take it a little bit further to look at those 4 areas and figure out which one, you know, they would need to improve on, or which one they want to see a change in, and how they can come up with what those goals would look like and how to implement it. What we did for the parents that are struggling with the boundaries is that I gave you the behavior chart that we know of, but the goal is to use the character traits that I gave you at the beginning versus the behavior chart that you probably have known from your past and to this point, and being able to implement those in the midst of it so that you're looking at that long term, what we're trying to accomplish versus the short term. This one's always really tricky in that I have parents and it gets very confusing because of the verbiage that we try to use and when they're trying to implement it. And I would say what I see most often is they lose sight of the main goal really being consistency. It's not necessarily that their child got upset every single time something happened. And that's what I hear most often, like, you didn't care. But that's not necessarily the goal. If the goal is the consistency, either because of a traumatic past and the need to know what to expect, or maybe it's just the consistency because you haven't been, you know, consistent as a parent and they just need to know that they can trust you. Because part of honesty is you do what you say you're going to do. And so it's just that follow through. It's not necessarily that they're going to be upset every single time. So that's the main goal of it. At the bottom, it has kind of what you can walk through if they're not, you know, aligning with some of the things that they've come up with on the chart, just the verbiage. And there's the instruction sheet that's in the middle that I gave you. And they're just reminders. Like, we don't take away time that is the whole family spending time together or connection time. We don't take reading a book at night together. If they connect doing that, you don't take that away. Like, you're wanting to leave in those positives. You can build in some of those things that they naturally have on a daily basis. But from the standpoint of you're not wanting to ever remove that relationship as much as possible. It gets confusing for parents because we call it the things they can earn instead of necessarily things we're taking away. And that is what's happening. But you're always trying to keep everything in a positive mindset and in positive language, you know, for them to feel like they can attain it, and also to keep a positive perspective on it, you know, and as a parent in the middle of it, can have less emotion with it when we're trying to implement it. So it has some things there that can give you some tools and being able to help parents understand how to do it. And then on the next page, it has where you can write it out. So it comes down, it's like the things that they can earn, the things they're in charge of, and then the things that they can earn. So the things they're in charge of are those character traits. And the things that they can earn, yes, it's really things that they may be losing on a daily basis. But we say it as in things they're earning. So it's not extra stuff coming to them that they're earning. It's more a matter of, you know, like if we are not following through on our job and we're losing pay as we go by not following through. It's more like that. So it has that. I gave you that. And then the next one heads into the parents' values and rituals. So what are things your child would say you value based on where you spend a majority of your time and how you spend your money? So that one is also a graph where they're thinking through, what do I see, my parents doing? Like their perspective is usually very different than a parent's. But where are those values? And I always think it's important if we can, to explore values, because that also will hit on the 3 areas of communication and connection and boundaries, on the things that they value and where their time and their effort and their money's going. And having kids evaluate that too. And so that's on the next page. And you would just be able to compare them both, use some of the same questions that we had from before. But looking at the system and really what is important to them as a family. What do the kids know is important? When things start to fall apart and things get difficult, are those parents still aligned? It can get easy, when kids are struggling, especially if they're from hard places and you're having to seek out lots of help and it's sacrificing a lot of time and effort, it's financially draining. It's all those things. Are they still aligned in what they value? What brought them together and what made them decide, to adopt or to have a child or to raise a child if it was somebody else's life choice that they chose to take on? What were those original things? Because that dream is still there, maybe hidden. And it may be a lot of other things on top of it at that point. But if they can remember what those values were and what led them to make that decision, it can be easier to take those steps that they need to take right now just to get through today. What we did in the practice this last summer, and something to try to encourage, and this has mixed reviews, I would say, is that we really tried to encourage the connection, knowing it was summer and knowing a lot of families, are spending time together, looking for ideas, is that we came up with what it went with our acronym of the CCFAM, and it was creating connections for family fun. And so we gave them lots of opportunities, and they could earn punches, is what we said, and be able to get candy. And we had some families that were all over it. They would come in and have earned quite a bit of candy by the time they left, to where even the parents and the kids, everybody was loaded up. And then we had some that didn't respond at all. And you know how that is. To where maybe the child would come in asking me about it, but the parent had never said anything. And even in summer, it's like one more thing, to keep up with or to recognize. So with some of them, it helped if I sat down with it and I was like, well, what are some of the things y'all have been doing together, to where I helped them through that process? Because even having it at home, in a home where maybe a parent is a teacher and is off school, out of school, off work, and the child's at home and they're spending a lot of time, it would get lost, in the shuffle of just daily life and trying to help them. So the more that you can give them some ideas, it starts on, along the line of like rituals and memories. And some of the kids were really motivated that I had and like, I want to do these, and would follow through. They would be on their parent. And some of the families that maybe one of those other types of parents that we talked about in the beginning, maybe the kids were really motivated, but they lost steam as the parents weren't motivated. So it'll help show you pretty quickly, like who's involved and who's not. But there are things that you can do even where you're at, whether it's punches or candy or whether it's something else. It's like, what could we be doing? And that's what it really took for me, is trying to broaden that perspective of we can only do so much in this, short session times that we have, as often as we're able to get them in, which sometimes, we were booked out and is not as often as we wanted to, is what can they be implementing at home? Because if they did that communication that we walked through, that's exactly what I'm doing when I'm with their child. If they were implementing it at home and trying to check themselves on a daily basis of what, they can improve on or what they're doing well at, then they'll get so much further than even me being in the picture, even if I was in the picture every week. It'll have a lot more meaning. So anything you can do to provide those opportunities and incentives if needed, or just that perspective, some of those motivated parents, will really follow through and be able to take it a bit further. The next page I gave you is the media questions for parents and children. This one is one that I think is really helpful at all times, just because children are always going to be influenced, whether they're teens or whether they're young kids, at some point in time they're watching a screen, more than likely, whether it's at a friend's or whether it's with you. So I know I've had several sets of parents, and they were not super thrilled, and I've been in the same spot of what their child was wanting to watch, whatever it was. And some of it was still Disney, but we also know where things can go. It's like, it's what the message is that's coming out of it that's more important than what happened, in the show itself. So I really encourage parents to sit with their kids. If their kids, I had one child and she was like, this is the first thing I'm gonna watch when I get to college, and I can watch whatever I want. She's 10, that's a long way away. But it was on her mind and she was gonna do it, but she wasn't gonna do it right then. So I was proud of her for that. But it's that side of maybe it would be okay to watch it together, because guess what? You can pause it every 5 seconds. And if you let them know ahead of time, we're gonna pause it, pretty consistently throughout, because I wanna make sure that we talk about it. Some of those kids that I've had, when we talked about that option, really we're all over that, and we're fine with that. Where sometimes we just say no, and we're not really giving them the opportunity, as parents, to be able to understand or hear another perspective. Like I said, I can get so bogged down in details that sometimes I lose that overall picture. But there's a much broader way of helping them be able to see what are the values of the people in the show or the movie or whatever it is. What are they encouraging? Who's the person who's getting all the attention? Is it because of positive or negative, behavior? Is it because of positive or negative things that they're doing? So what's motivating them? So it's looking at characters, and it's looking at, what is in movies and TV and media, and helping them be able to look at it for themselves. Because if we can give them that perspective of recognizing things just like they see the flaws in us as parents or as professionals, then they'll be able to see them for themselves. And that's an influence that's going to be there long term. So that's something that I always like to put in there. That one comes from kind of a box office wisdom series that we do every summer in the church, with of just having a different movie that they're looking at from a perspective that, when I tried to look at how could I implement that, it's really helped some families be able to look through their values and even values of the things that they're seeing and doing. And I'm always amazed, I'm not shy about pulling things up on YouTube. If a kid's like, hey, I really like this song, and I listen to it, it lets me know what they're into, because a lot of times I don't even know what that is. And some of them I have pulled up and listened to and had to think about how to approach. So it's good for me even to use those questions. Like, what do you think they're talking about? What are they promoting? What's the goal? What are they encouraging? So it can always be interesting what you'll come up with. So these are all, different resources. So goal of, today really was to give you lots of tools. You're not going to be able to cover all of this with a parent, but if you knew what they identify as a weak point for them, then one of these handouts could be something that could take it a little bit of a step further and possibly give them a one-step goal, to work towards. It's not going to fix it all, but it'll give you some steps, and even could give them some more after that, to where they could see even a longer term change that could take place versus just a short term. So that about wraps up where I am at. So if you had someone today that couldn't come to today, we are taping it, and so we'll be able to have that. You've got that handout for the training at CCFAM, and we'll have it available. So if you had a coworker or someone you wanted to come, we'll have it available soon enough for them to watch.
In the interest of time, I just want to say thank you to Dr. Rhonda Johnson for being here today. And thank you all for being here today.